Nintendo GameCube.
Oh, the GameCube advertising was just so weird, but yet memorable. Oh, the GameCube. What a fantastic little console this was. The GameCube first launched in Japan in September 2001 and eventually made it over to Europe in May 2002. And on a side note, my voice is finally starting to come back, so...
Oh, yeah.
Now, the GameCube was home to many iconic games, ranging from Super Mario Sunshine, Metroid Prime, Animal Crossing, Pikmin and Pikmin 2, and just so many good games. It was the first console I ever played Simpsons Hit and Run on, it's probably my favourite console of all time, and today we're going to be diving into every launch title, in Europe, by the way, not the others, because they do differ, every launch title for the GameCube, and see how they hold up, what the reviews were like, what the game's like. So this is quite an ambitious little project I've started here for a week. Let's see how it goes.
Number 1.
Starting off, we're looking at a game that's kind of been overshadowed since the Arkham series of games. This is Batman Vengeance, developed by Ubisoft, and it did originally launch in 2001, but here in Europe for the GameCube, it was a launch title in 2002.
Something's in my ass!
Now, Batman Vengeance has a 70 Metascore on Metacritic, which isn't too bad, but I think the issue with it is it's just really generic. That's the impression I've got from spending some time with it. It's just very generic, very early 2000s, but that is what it is. And it does a good job. It's got a nice art style, it's from the animated series, and interestingly enough, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill both reprise their roles as Batman and the Joker, which is just very cool. Very cool indeed.
Number 2.
Now, changing the tone up entirely, next up we have NHL Hits 2002. Which was the first in the NHL Hits franchise. It was developed by Midway Games and again launched with the GameCube in 2002. Now I'm just going to say outright, I am not a sporty games person, I'm not a sporty person at all. NHL Hits, it's not bad. It reviewed quite well, 79 on Metacritic average, which is really good. It's quite arcadey. I mean, you can literally become on fire, like physical flames, which is pretty cool, so it doesn't take itself too seriously. However, I've only really played like one round of it. I don't really have much to say about it. It's not bad, it's just a sports game. I'm sure one of many that people have played over the years, so not too much to mention on this one, so we can just move on to the next game.
Number 3.
Once again, a sports game. I'm just going to rush through this because I have absolutely no interest. This is International Superstar Soccer 2, developed by Konami. It reviewed kind of well, criticised for AI and the removal of RPG feature, whatever that's supposed to mean, because I didn't play the first one. So, yep, moving on.
Luigi! Coming.
Number 4.
Now, this next game really needs no introduction from that little segment there. This is Luigi's Mansion, and it's fucking awesome. It's very good. It was the first Mario franchise game to launch on the GameCube, and was the second time that Luigi was the main character of the game after the infamous Mario is Missing for the Super Nintendo. The basic premise is Mario gets kidnapped or disappears, and Luigi has to go and hunt for him in his haunted mansion with the help from Professor E. Gadd with his ghost hunting equipment. Out of all the GameCube launch titles, Luigi's Mansion was the best-selling one. It was the best-selling game of the month it came out before it reached Europe. It sold 257,000 units during its first week in sale in America. Reviews-wise, it was received very well. The GameCube version on Metacritic has an average of 78 out of 100. The 3DS one, although not really relevant to this video, did score just 4 points lower at 74 out of 100. The game is very good. I'm sure I don't need to go into too depth on this one because most of you by now have hopefully played it. If you haven't played it, what are you doing? Go and play it. It's on 3DS as well, but also we can emulate it, so yeah, good game. Moving on.
Number 5.
Let's go, baby! Burnout! I am a huge fan of the Burnout franchise. One of my top 4 favourite games ever is Burnout 3 Takedown. Love it, love it, love it. Now, I'm not as big of a fan of the original Burnout, but it is still very iconic and really, really good. Now, this game actually launched in 2001 in Europe for PS2, but it did come out on the 3rd of May, same day as the GameCube. So we're still classing this as a launch title because that's what it is. Burnout was developed by Criterion Games, who would obviously go on to develop many more Burnout games and many more Need for Speed games, so love that from them. It was published by Acclaim Entertainment. Burnout is known for its fast racing and incredibly over-the-top crashes and destruction, and the high-risk kind of gameplay that you have to win the races by avoiding, getting impaled by oncoming traffic. This is the game that started it all. As I said, it's not amazing. There's a very small collection of cars compared to what you get in the later games, but it started a true legacy. And for that, Burnout, you have my heart and undying respect. Burnout received very positive reviews. It reviewed around the same as Luigis Mansion actually on Metacritic, with 78 out of 100 for the GameCube version, and the PS2 version scoring just 1 point higher at 79.
Number 6.
Okay, so next up we have quite an interesting one. Cell Damage, which is a game developed by Pseudo Interactive and published by EA, released on Xbox and GameCube on May 3rd, 2002 in Europe, and obviously a bit beforehand in the rest of the world. It was a vehicle combat game, kind of Twisted Metal-esque, and it was based on a fictional cartoon show within the game called Cell Damage, and you played as one of the cartoon characters to destroy the other cartoon characters. Interesting little fact about Cell Damage is that Europe actually got a PS2 exclusive port developed by a different company. It was a budget title. And weirdly, even though I had literally never heard of the game until making this video, it has been ported to PS3, PS4, PS Vita, Xbox One, and most recently even the Nintendo Switch, which is very strange. Reviews-wise, it was mostly favourable but kind of mixed. The GameCube version specifically got 67 out of 100 on Metacritic. The game overall was praised for how it looked, its cartoony graphics and cell shading, but the actual gameplay wasn't quite up to standard for everyone. But I know a lot of people will look back on this as a childhood favourite, so please don't let me sit here and shit on it for you.
Number 7.
Okay, so by now you all know what Crazy Taxi is. It was released in arcades in 1999 and then Sega ported it to the Dreamcast in 2000. Shortly after, at the launch of the GameCube, Crazy Taxi showed up there as well. I just got to say right off the bat, shout out to the soundtrack of Crazy Taxi for having the offspring, which is really cool. I would play you the soundtrack, but for copyright reasons obviously I won't, so we've just got the generic music instead. Now you should really know how the gameplay of Crazy Taxi goes, but essentially you just have to take passengers to their location as quickly as possible before the time runs out. It's addictive, it's fun, it's quirky, and best of all, it's on literally every platform you could possibly imagine, including your phone. The GameCube version in question scored a very nice 69 out of 100 on Metacritic, citing the main issue to be the lack of content, as it was a direct port of the Dreamcast version which people had rinsed to death, and there was nothing extra on top of that at all, and for a console launch title, it just kind of felt like it was lacking slightly, but what was there was of course very good, because people know and love it.
Number 8.
Okay, so next we have another pretty iconic game, Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. Now, Sonic Adventure 2 was released at the end of the Dreamcast lifespan, so it didn't sell very well, although it was a very good game. So, Sega ported it to the GameCube for the launch, with some additional features. Now, interestingly enough, this actually marked the first time that Sonic had come to a Nintendo console, which is really cool. Obviously now, these days, that's just common practice, everyone knows that, but back in the day, this was a pretty big deal. Now, the new version brought a few changes to the Chow Garden and the Chow Adventure, but it also enhanced a lot of the models from the Dreamcast version, and some of the lights and shadows also work differently to look a bit nicer for the new generation. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle received very positive reviews with a 73% on Metacritic. It was actually lower than the Dreamcast version, but it was still praised quite highly, although the camera was still an issue. But that was an issue in the first game as well. It was the #1 selling title on the GameCube in the first week that it came out. It sold 2.56 million copies overall, which is pretty respectable. The little blue hedgehog that could.
I don't think he can eat solid solid food.
Well, then put it in the blender.
Well, if you say so.
The chili dog, not the baby!
Number 9.
Okay, so we're just about to come up for the halfway mark.
I've gone too far. Is this it? My death?
Okay, so we've got Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 2. Initially released for the PlayStation 2 in August 2001, it obviously followed through to the GameCube and Xbox the following year. I'm sure by hearing the name you can kind of guess what the gameplay is going to be like, and you can obviously see it on the screen right now. It did also feature a park editor as well, which was pretty cool, and some multiplayer, but obviously local, because this was the early 2000s. So the GameCube and Xbox versions actually had additional levels compared to the PS2 one, although the PS2 version did actually score higher, and interestingly enough, the highest scoring was 85 out of 100 for the Game Boy Advance version on Metacritic. The GameCube had 78 out of 100, so still a very favourable score. I don't have too much to say about this one. I would play you the soundtrack, but once again, it is copyrighted. So, like, there's Black Sabbath's Paranoid, so I've just chosen some Banjo-Kazooie music instead, because that's what I had on my computer. So, whoopsie, moving on.
Number 10.
So next up we have Donald Duck Quack Attack, or if you're outside of Europe, it's known as Donald Duck Goin' Quackers, which is just the peak of comedy from Disney there. This game was developed by, well, this specific version was developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft themselves. In the span of just under 2 years, this game launched on 7 different platforms, and literally every version is different, so bit weird. There's a Game Boy Color version, which is obviously different from the rest. There's a Game Boy Advance version, which is different from the rest. The PS1 version is also different, and then that takes us to the PlayStation 2 version, which was later released for the GameCube, which is exactly the same, thankfully. There was also a different version for Windows, Dreamcast, and N64, and they were all used on the Rayman 2 engine, which is quite cool. Anyway, to pretty much summarize Donald Duck Quack Attack, it's just like a version of Crash Bandicoot. Like, it does what it does alright. The CG cutscenes are pretty cool. The GameCube version was actually the lowest rated one of them all, with 61 out of 100. The music was praised though, and the quality of that was also praised, but the length was a massive issue. It's a very short game.
Number 11.
Okay, so now we're on to something pretty good. Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, a GameCube exclusive Star Wars game, released at launch with the GameCube. Now, I had this one back in the day, and I gotta say, this game is awesome. Like, I just love it so much. Gameplay-wise, it is a fast-paced, in-flight action game. You can kind of guess what it is from the title and also looking at the screen. Controls-wise, the game controlled really well. There was a really cool mechanic where you could kind of give some basic instructions to the wingmen using the D-pad in your controller. There was 7 different crafts that you could unlock in the base game, including the X-Wing, the A-Wing, and even the Millennium Falcon, which is always a bonus. This game scored a very, very nice 90 out of 100 on Metacritic, and the only real criticism for the game that I've really read is the fact that there's no multiplayer mode, which, you know, isn't ideal, especially when you're on a Nintendo Family console, but we can forgive it for the fact that the rest of the game was fucking awesome. Moving on.
You agreed to stay away! I lied.
Number 12.
Oh golly gee shucks, another sports game, just what I wanted in my video. This is ESPN International Winter Sports 2002, developed by Konami. Yay! It's just a game about snowboarding and skiing. That's kind of it. It's alright. The GameCube had quite a low ranking of 62 out of 100 on Metacritic. The main complaints were the fact that the gameplay was very simplistic and there wasn't really much to do. There was a 2-player mode, but once again that would have got boring quite quickly. So, just wasn't really any value for money here. Classic Konami. Moving on.
Number 13.
Even more sports games. Yep, this is FIFA 2002. I have absolutely nothing else to say about this game. It's football, it's FIFA, it's the same as it was the year before, it's the same as it was the year after. The GameCube version scored 78 out of 100 on Metacritic, so a nice, good score for it there. That's all I've got to say about it. Let's move on.
Monkey.
Number 14.
Well, if you couldn't guess from that little clip there, the next game is Super Monkey Ball. It released in 2001 in arcades in Japan, and then made its way over to the rest of the world on May 3rd, 2002 with the launch of the GameCube in Europe. You essentially control the platform with the analog stick and you have to roll the monkey towards the goal, collecting as many bananas as you can and also avoiding falling off. Now, the game progressively gets more difficult as you go through the levels. It is quite a frustrating game. I have played it for many hours, and every time it never fails to make me want to punch my screen through and smash the controller on the floor. Monkey Ball is also famous for its party games, ranging from Monkey Race to Monkey Fight. There's Monkey Bowling, loads of just cool things that you could play with your friends. Obviously locally, this was pre-online. All in all, a very good game. Now, reviews-wise, this is sat at a nice 87 out of 100 on Metacritic, and was a very commercially successful game as well. Monkey Ball went on to have numerous sequels, and most recently had a nice collection of remakes of the first 3 console entries for Switch, PS4, 5, Xbox One, and Series X. So, you know, Monkey Ball's still rolling along quite strong.
Number 15.
Okay, so this is XG3 Extreme G Racing, also just known as Extreme G3, a racing game developed by Acclaim Studios Cheltenham and published by Acclaim. The game has Wipeout or F-Zero kind of vibes to it and depicts the sport of extreme G racing in the 23rd century, so everything is just very fast. Now this is another one I hadn't heard of, let alone knew that it was from a franchise, so it's quite interesting to see this. It's actually quite a fun game. There's weapon mechanics as well, the tracks are quite interesting, there's 10 tracks in the game. It reviewed pretty well as well. The GameCube version was the highest scoring of the two out of GameCube and PS2, with 83 out of 100 on Metacritic.
Number 16.
Okay, so now we have Tarzan Untamed, also known as Tarzan Freeride in Europe and Japan, another Ubisoft Disney game. Now the game picks up a little while after the film ends. Tarzan and Jane are now married, and life is quite happy until a band of British explorers come to capture him and take him back to England and use him as an attraction for a zoo or a museum or something like that. So that's just fun for Tarzan, I suppose. Gameplay wise, it's just some platforming and some really light combat. It's nothing particularly strenuous, as this is a children's game. Review wise, it didn't score too high, 61 out of 100 for the GameCube version on Metacritic, with the PS2 version sat just 2 points below. The main criticism was just the lack of depth and the fact that it's very short, but as mentioned, this is really just a kids platforming game, so we'll give it the benefit of the doubt.
Number 17.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. Now this is a sick game. Developed by the legendary Neversoft and published by the not-so-legendary Activision, it initially launched in 2001 in the UK for PlayStation, PlayStation 2, but then later came to GameCube and several other platforms in the UK in 2002. By now, I shouldn't have to explain Pro Skater gameplay to you, but the long story short is you skate, it's not hard. Reviews-wise, it reviewed really well across the board for all platforms. The highest rated was the PlayStation 2 version, which got 97 out of 100, which is just amazing. The GameCube one had 91 out of 100, which again is still awesome. Now, the Pro Skater games are known for their weird crossovers with characters and also just some advertising as well. The game featured 3 strange skaters you could unlock. Darth Maul, Doom Guy, and Wolverine were all available. And in the game, there were boards for Taco Bell, Nokia, and Jeep. So, just some fun trivia for you there. Anyway, moving on.
Number 18.
We have reached the final game on our list of GameCube launch titles. Wave Race Blue Storm, a sequel to Wave Race 64 and the 3rd game in the series, and also the last, which is kind of depressing. This is a in-house Nintendo game that many people might not realise that looking at it. Gameplay wise, it just boils down to racing jet skis on water. It's pretty fun, but it's also very difficult. Now, reviews wise, it scored 80 out of 100 on Metacritic. It was praised for the water effects, weather effects, and its physics, which at the time, it was second to none. It was the best on the market. But it was flagged a little bit for having quite low poly visuals, and the character design was quite uninspired, and also just for having a lot of like rehashes of levels from Wave Race 64, and also the difficulty. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but overall this game is a lot of fun, and if you do get a chance to, I 100% would check it out. Bloody hell, we've come to the end of that list of games. Now, my voice sounds decidedly better, in like for about 4 minutes onwards, because I started recording this while I still was a bit rough, and then came back to it a few days later, and now I'm reborn. So thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, tap the bell, all the usual things, because it really helps me to continue making these in future, and I will see you in Friday's video next week. Bye bye.